Good afternoon, everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you today. We have a remarkable and distinguished panel here. Their collective artistic and intellectual achievement is breathtaking, and they represent multiple generations and layers of musical influence, mentorship, and leadership, stretching back more than 60 years with profound implications for the future. All of us in SMTD are so pleased to support this residency. It is part of our long-standing commitment to and celebration of voice and opera, and our aspiration to train the next generation of singers prepared to lead the evolution of their art forms. It is also an expression of our deep and always renewing commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and specifically uplifting African American performing artists, educators, and scholars. And finally, central to our success here at SMTD is our vibrant connection to the profession. And so we are so excited that Karen Slack and Will Liverman have taken time out of their flourishing careers to be with us. I want to extend many thanks to Amanda Majeski, who imagined this project, and Caitlin Lynch and Matthew Thompson, whose collaborative efforts have been instrumental in bringing this residency to fruition. This project is possible through funding from the Arts Initiative, the SMTD Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and the Department of Voice and Opera. I encourage all of you to attend the other events in this residency, the multi-genre vocal masterclass tomorrow, Friday at 4:30 in Britain, and the multi-genre recital on Sunday at 2 p.m. in Stamps Auditorium, as well as the student-curated Q&A that will immediately follow. So now it's my pleasure to welcome our panelists, Ms. Karen Slack, Mr. Will Liverman, who is not yet here, but will be soon. He's here. There he is. Perfect timing. Hi. Nice to see you. Professor George Shirley, Dr. Louise Toppin, and our moderator, Dr. Antonio C. Cuyler.
Welcome. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you all. These artists, educators, scholars, wonderful folks, multifaceted, multi-hyphenate. And so I want to start, I'm going to jump right in, if that's okay with you all. I want to talk about arts education. It is critical for the identification, development, and nurturing of opera's workforce, right? And so I wonder if we could start by you all sharing with us the informal and formal arts education that you received that prepared you for your roles that you now hold. And any one of you can start.
You just got here, so you should start.
And go. Right.
That's what friends are for.
Oh, yeah. I guess I can start. Yeah, education is so important. My dad was an educator, and I got into opera, classical singing in high school. I was a part of the Governor's School for the Arts program in Norfolk, Virginia, and they, we got someone, GSA out there? And in that school, they have different disciplines like musical theater, visual arts, and whatever, and I did the voice program, and that's what that was my pathway into opera, and we did fully staged performances and concerts, took voice lessons, and really was a game changer for me and opened my eyes to this art form that I knew nothing about, growing up in gospel, and it was, I'm really thankful for that education program for where it's led me to.
And can you say a little bit more about gospel too? Because we want to talk about formal and informal arts education.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Gospel is a big part of my upbringing, kind of definitely my musical DNA, and where I started, in church, as far as I can remember back, starting singing in the choir, playing a little bit on keys. And it was just so great because, at our church, we learned everything by rote and by ear. So it gave me a very strong, kind of a creative approach to music because, we would, I remember our choir director would play the little tape recorder and then listen to the parts and then sing it back to us, soprano, alto, tenor. And that's how we learned, so to have that coupled with, the classical music that I received later, I was really thankful for having both of those methods and ways of learning music and approaches to music and the different genres and how they inform each other was really big for me, so, yeah.
I did not grow up in the church, which most African American, I think, are musicians did. My parents, I grew up in the church of Shaka Khan and Earth, Wind and Fire, Earth, Wind and Fire, and the Sounds of Philadelphia, because that's where I'm a Philly girl. So my parents were married for eight years before I was born, and so when I was born, I was going to concerts with them. Like my first concert was 3 years old at the Spectrum singing Earth, Wind and Fire. Because my parents loved music. And it's probably, and also the golden era hip hop, I grew up in the city, urban girl, so I grew up with all of those sounds and loved music. I wanted to be Whitney Houston and, Anita Baker and all those, the Diana Ross. I'd put a towel on my head and stand in the, in the mirror. And so I loved to always perform. And I had a big voice, a big, high, loud voice, but never thinking opera, right? And it was in the 4th grade. Back in those days, every elementary school had a string program. And so we would always violin or, I swear if someone had given me a cello, my life would have been different because I hated the violin, I hated practicing and all those things. But I could always match pitch and I had good rhythm. And so I had music teachers like, Karen, you need to take this music serious. But I always wanted to be a veterinarian. Literally until I was 14, I was going to be a veterinarian, And then middle school, the teacher heard my voice in music class because, again, music was a part of the education system in public schools. And I'm a lot older than I look, so just... as my music girl, you need to take this serious, this music thing. And I'm like, I'm not doing music. I'm over here with the cool kids, I'm not over there with the music kids. And she twisted my arm to audition for the RC. I'm cool now, right? I'm thinking we're cool now. I didn't know any better then, but she twisted my arm to audition for the Performing Arts High School. And I said, fine. And I went and sang My Greatest Love of All, and got in. And my music teacher loved opera. And my first experience to opera, exposure to it, was Maria Callas singing Casta Diva.
Yes.
And Jesse Norman singing the Liebestod, the Isolde, and seeing Denise Graves do her first Carmen before she went to the Metropolitan Opera. I was 16 years old. I remember where I was sitting at the Academy of Music, and I go there often when I'm able to be home in Philadelphia. And I sit there and I remember what it was like because I had heard voices that sounded like my pretend opera voice, And I remember my teacher said, I'm going to find a way to pay for you to give voice lessons and piano lessons. So the school district of Philadelphia paid for me to have voice lessons when I was 16, 17. My parents were like, okay, I guess she's going to be an opera singer. It was never like, no, you can't do that. It was, they obviously saw my talent, my passion. And, fast forward, I won a big competition in New York when I was 18 years old, moved to New York City, was supposed to make my big debut at 20 years old, but I got kicked out of the program. Rosa Puncel Foundation was the foundation that existed back in the 90s. Because I did not want to make my big debut in Lincoln Center. I told them, I think I'm too young. So they kicked me out of the program. Send me back to Philadelphia. I'm sitting in Wendy's downtown Philly on Walnut Street, if those who know it. Mm-hmm. And these 3 kids came over to me and said, you're the girl who was in Opera News. And I'm like, who, what? Like, what? They said, yeah, we remember you from that competition. They were students at Curtis Institute of Music. Took me back to Curtis. I didn't even know what Curtis was. Now, mind you, I had gone to Settlement Music School. I had gone to the Governor's School in Pennsylvania. Never knew. That's another conversation right around like the equity part of like, if you're from this side, you don't know, even though you have talent. Only these other people, they know. So anyway, I went back to Curtis, had a jam session, changed numbers. The next day, Michael Eliason called me. He was running the voice department at Curtis, and he invited me to audition at Curtis, and that's how I got to Curtis Institute of Music. Wow. From a Wendy's, man, we should do a commercial, right? I know that's Will's jam. It's like Wendy's. But yeah, so that was my formal training, and did my young artist at San Francisco Opera, and started singing or whatever. But like that was my story. Like just had a gift, and just the stars aligned for certain things for me, and I had a very supportive family. That's how it happened.
Thank you.
Mine is quickly, I'm back at the church, but I grew up in a Black Episcopal church because my father's family is from the Caribbean, and there's a lot of Anglican church from that route. So that means you're hearing spirituals to slightly Andre Crouch. You can't go too far because they start to look at you funny. But you have Bach, and we tried my tribute once in the church, and people were like, "What?" So I heard a few gospel chords, but my parents themselves my mother loved Mahalia Jackson, so we'd hear recordings of her singing. My father's favorite recording was Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto. And then my mom had a recording of Leontine Price, of the face of a Black woman singing Aida, and I thought that was fascinating. And I grew up on the campus of Virginia State University, which is an HBCU in Virginia, and so all the greats came through there. I played the piano for Duke Ellington. I saw Ella Fitzgerald in person. People like George Shirley came through and did recitals at a time that they were not, because it's right on I-95, north to south of the East Coast. And so my musical education was Undine Moore taught on the faculty and was family to us. And so we spent our life with all sorts of possibilities. Black music, I thought, was a part of everybody's growing up. And so I go to college and don't see any until I come to Michigan. I have the first course in African American music, and I was sort of hooked by that part of it, but also still being trained with Western European music. And I was going to be a cardiac surgeon, so I went to college for something else too. But ended up as 2 degrees in piano, and then somebody heard me sing and said, "You're a singer," and then sent me to George Shirley for my next degree. So, so it's his fault that I'm a singer, and it's his fault that I'm here at Michigan. So anytime you have a complaint, find George Shirley.
Well, first of all, I'm over here because I've been a bad boy. I mean, no. This is the reason I'm over here. It's not COVID. I tested negative yesterday, but something's grabbed me in spite of my nosing that I use to protect myself from things like that. And so here I sit, and if I start coughing, just know that I gotta leave and get rid of what is bugging me. But anyway, I grew up in the African American Episcopal Church, one of the large Black congregations in the country. Born in Indianapolis, my mother and father were both musical. They sang in the choir there. I had my first musical exposure in the church. And my father was from Kentucky. He and his brothers used to play for dances down in Kentucky. My dad was an illiterate musician. Now, what do I mean by that? He couldn't read music, but he was 10 times the musician that I'll ever be, because he could sit down, he could hear something, and sit down and figure out the chords and then play it. So he was my first accompanist. I started singing, and my mother, I think, maybe had a year of college at Shorter College down in Arkansas, and she could read music. My parents started me with piano lessons when I was about 4.5, 5 years old. That was the Thompson book, which didn't work out because my students will tell you I can't play the piano worth a hoot. But it started me along the path of becoming musically literate. My mother and I, when I was about 4.5, we would sing at churches in and around Indianapolis. My dad would accompany us. My mother would recite some poetry and then would sing something. And I started singing hymns and what have you. And I didn't plan any of this. I didn't plan to be born, didn't plan to be given the gift of music, voice, but it was given to me. I wound up making my first recording when I was 5 years old. Wow. There was a big department store downtown Indianapolis, Bloch's, and they had a children's hour, which was a little competition. Now this is By 1939, my parents entered me in this competition. Now, Indianapolis was, in the South. So here comes this little black boy, 5 years old. And I sang in the competition. And I won second prize. Wow. Which was an opportunity to make a recording. Now, this is all happening. I don't know where all this is leading, right? So I recorded this piece that I sang. It was an old Bing Crosby tune called There's a Gold Mine in the Sky. My dad played by ear. And I can remember standing in the recording studio, watching the wax peel off of this disc as it was being incised. My parents had this recording up until about 1971 when they moved to residence in Detroit. And it was lost. But I can remember at the end of this recording, hearing this little voice say, "My name is George Irving Shirley, and I'm 5 years old." Little did I know that this was telling me something about where my life was going. When we moved from Indianapolis to Detroit in 1940, the school system in Indianapolis, in Detroit, the music education programs in Detroit were, if not the best in the country, one of the best, producing performers in classical, jazz, you name it. Northern High School, I attended Northern High School in Detroit. About 2 or 3 years behind me was Smokey Robinson. A fellow just passed away this year named Charles Bowles, Beans Bowles, a very fine jazz pianist of renown. But there we were. From the first grade on, we were exposed to music education. By the 6th grade, if you had any chops at all, you could read music. Junior high school, we had a wonderful choir at Sherrard Junior High. At Northern High School, we did Messiah every Christmas. And the teacher, a woman who was Canadian named Claire Weimer, I found out years later that she had received a whole lot of pushback when she told the principal and the others that she was going to have her choir sing Messiah. And they said, "You got to be joking. These kids can't learn this piece. Can't do that." Every Christmas we sang Messiah. And I started singing the tenor solos in the 11th grade. My first experience singing anything from Verdi Requiem was on one of our spring concerts when we did the Kyrie, and I did the solos, not realizing that I was being prepared to do these performances with Philadelphia Orchestra and other major symphony orchestras around the world. It had nothing to do with it. It was in the plan I was given when I was conceived. So, my senior year in high school, I decided I'm going to become a music teacher because I was so impressed with the music education that I had received from the teachers in Detroit. So I went to Wayne University as a major in choral music ed. Opera wasn't something we listened to in my household. We listened to Grand Ole Opry on Saturday nights from Tennessee. Minnie Pearl and all those good folks. But I did take a liking to symphonic music for some reason. And I started listening to a program from Canada that came on about 11 o'clock at night. And classical the orchestral music really grabbed me. So when I finally got my first record player, one of these little boxes, I started buying, when I could afford to, recordings of symphonic recordings. So in college, Wayne didn't have an opera program. It was music ed. My senior year, 2 things happened that I wasn't expecting. My supervisor, a woman named Marvel O'Hara, who I think Professor Lynch has a relationship with. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Talk about linkages. Mm-hmm. Her great-grandma went to the Board of Education. There was an opening at Miller High School. And she put my name up for the job as an emergency substitute. Now, I didn't ask her to do that, but she did it. And I got the job. My last year at Wayne was a very busy year because before that, the Glee Club director had come to me and said, you know, I want to do Stravinsky's Oedipus Rex. Take a look at the role of Oedipus. And he loaned me a recording of Peter Pears singing Tyler Roll. So I said, okay. And we did 3 performances of it on Woodward Avenue at the Jesse Bonstell Playhouse. I have a recording of it. I loved the experience, but it did not speak to me as a way of life. I did the performances, and then I tied into my job at Miller High School. Wow. People say, okay, I was the first black teacher on the high school level in vocal music. Well, I didn't ask for that either, but it was given to me. So my future wife and I planned to get married. I had my job. I bought a new car, a 2-door Mercury for $3,000. I was set. Thank you. And then I got a letter from Uncle Sam in May that said, you're going to be married to me in June. My plans blown apart, absolutely destroyed. I said, you got to be joking. What are you talking about? But I had no choice. So I went into the Army as a bandsman. I played euphonium. Where did I learn to play euphonium? At my church. We had a member at Ebenezer AME Church who was a professional photographer, but also a very good musician. And he talked the minister into allowing him to form a band made up of the youngsters in the church. And so I started playing euphonium, and that was my scholarship at Wayne as a bandsman. Used to play for the Lions games, and so it was great. So all of this is happening, and I have nothing to do with it. And I make that point because of what I'm going to say in a few minutes. So my plans for teaching were ruined at that point, but they said they'd keep the job open for me. I had heard about a new organization being formed with the United States Army Band in Washington, D.C. It was going to be the United States Army Chorus, a band that never had a choral unit like the singing sergeants to the Air Force and the sea chanters, Navy. And 3 of my friends from Wayne went, and they were accepted. They were all, 3 of them were white. I didn't go for a couple of reasons. It was a 3-year deal. I didn't want to spend 3 years in the Army. Second reason was because the band had never had a black member. And Arlington, Virginia is in the South. So I thought, I'm not going to spend what little money I've got to go and audition for this organization. I won't have a chance of a snowball of Hades of getting into. So I went into the Army as a bandsman. After my first 8 weeks of learning how to kill people, went back to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri to learn to play with the band. And after about 3 weeks, really, of playing the flag up in the morning, Fort Leonard Wood is an engineering post, so we played graduation cycles, and then maybe a little concert, but most often, playing 8-ball until we played the flag down at night. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to, this is 2 years of my life doing this, you got to be joking. So I, along with 2 other fellows, took a leave of absence and went to Washington, D.C. to audition for the chorus. The fellow who drove the car was a trumpet player. He couldn't sing his way out of a paper bag, but he thought he would audition for the band, right? So we got there, and my 2 friends, who were both white, sang for the captain, Samuel Laboda, a Russian American. He was second in command of the band, and he was the conductor of the chorus. And Sam told him right off the bat, thank you very much, but we won't be able to use you. And I thought, oh. So I sang my audition, and he looked at me and he said, can you wait a few minutes? I said, yes, sir. A few minutes became about a half hour. I thought, yeah, you idiot, that's the same old stuff, So he came out of the command room and he said, well, we've decided that we would like to have you join us if it's what you really want. And I said before, my genes don't always pop to the surface like that. I usually think about what I'm going to say, but I didn't think about it this time. I looked at him and I said, "Sir, if it wasn't what I really wanted, I wouldn't have traveled all night to get here." And he flushed red. And he said, "Yeah, you're right." Sam Labota became the reason, he was the reason why I was admitted to the Army, this new unit, the Army Corps, as the first black member of the organization. And people say to me, "Well, you know, you've done this, you've broken down." I'd say, "No, I haven't broken down anything. What I've done has been a result of someone on the inside deciding that I belonged on the inside." That was true at the Metropolitan Opera, when Rudolph Bing had the guts to stand up to those members of his board who could not countenance the idea of a black singer standing on that stage. But he had the guts to say, "It's going to happen." Sam Labota had the guts to say, "This is going to happen." I found out years later that he had to go all the way to the Pentagon to get me in. So nothing happens one-sided. I'm just grateful for the education I had in Detroit, the education I had in my church, and for the opportunities that have been dropped into my lap. I had nothing to do with it. I was given everything that I needed to do what I've done. So it started with music education in the public schools. And that's where it needs to be. It needs to be at the grassroots level. And in Detroit now, there's still good work being done, but it's not supported the way it used to be. Mm-hmm. Because people think, "Well, you want to become a professional musician? You gotta go and you're not gonna make any money doing this." Well, it's not about that. Yes, making money is important, but the most important thing is doing what's inside of you, what's been implanted within you to do. And everyone here at this university is here because you belong here. But so you need to do the work without complaining, because you don't know what the outcome is going to be. But doing this work is going to prepare you for what right now you don't have an idea is going to happen in the future. I found out recently that one of my former students is a president of a university in Florida. What? Mm-hmm. And the fellow that really put me on a path to having a career was a member of the Army Chorus who got out before I was due to get out. He didn't know I was getting out. And he wound up, he took a degree in law here at the University of Michigan and sang in the Glee Club. He wasn't a music student. But he wound up eventually singing for over 20 years as a leading bass at the Metropolitan Opera. From Southfield, Michigan, our barbarian. Read about him. So I say to all of you, do the work that's in front of your face without complaining, because it's going to take you where you are supposed to go. But music education is at the root of it.
So I want to point out equitable arts education, music education. These are some themes from in the responses. Preparedness, opportunity, serendipity. Those are that lead to the outcomes. But so with so many choices, you got gospel, you got jazz, you got ska, you got rock. Why opera? What makes opera so powerful that it drawed you in and attracted you to it as artists?
For me, visually, it's one of the, my mature self will say because it encompasses all of the arts. You need a libretto. You need musicians, singers, musicians. Somebody has to build the set. Somebody's got to write the music. All those things, and dance at one point in some operas. So it encompasses everything, both the performing and creative arts. But for me, the power of the music, you don't have to understand the text. You don't even have to understand the story. And most great operas, you could just close your eyes and just experience the emotion. And also the sheer magnitude of sound that is coming out of one's body without a microphone. That is we call us the heavyweight champions of vocal art, is the opera singer. Because you have to, in America, have to fill these large spaces, with just these two little pieces of flesh in your mouth and your body that God created for you to be able to do that. Like, what greater art for me, there is none. And I love hip hop, so let's just be very clear about that. But it's one A, for me is opera.
I think the chance to be able to tell stories that aren't yours, but stories that you have a chance to affect how people see and think about the world, depending on what the story is. And sometimes, if they're African American stories, then it even gives you a chance to tell something that won't be seen or heard elsewhere. And you have a chance to provide history, because many of the newer operas are giving you a chance to look at how we have come to be as people. But all operas give you the chance to just, as a very shy person, which I know those of you that know me don't think I'm shy, but I was once painfully shy and studied, when I first met Mr. Shirley, I was so painfully shy. And the chance to step into a character that wasn't me is actually what helped to draw me out as a person. And I think that that's what opera can do for so many different types of people. And it gave me a chance to try musically, especially, my thing has been also contemporary music. I love contemporary music, which has allowed me to pull from so many styles of work. And genres and styles of vocal singing, even just growing and learning how to stretch my instrument to navigate all of this. So,
yeah, opera's so weird. I remember, I think one of the first hooks for me was the themes. I was in high school and I saw Die Valkyrie, and I fell asleep pretty fast. And then Act 3 rolls along, and I hear the Ride of the Valkyries. But I wake up, I'm like, wait a minute. And I turn to Mr. Fisher, my high school teacher, I'm like, did the opera rip this from Bugs Bunny? I didn't know that the opera was first. They, sample from that. And so that was sort of a first light bulb moment into this art form, and I start to realize the costumes. And what Karen's saying for me too was just the sheer amount of volume and sound that the human voice can put out unamplified was tremendous. And then we took a trip to the Met, and it was the same sort of thing. We were way up in the nosebleed seats going to the Metropolitan Opera for the first time. We took a trip down there, and I was just, again, blown away by how the fact that I could just hear all the sound hitting me as if they were right there. And the more that I studied opera, the more I came to appreciate opera for what it is, and all the amazing things that it has to offer.
What else? What other art form gives you the opportunity to continue to be a kid?
yeah.
I can remember from this playing and making a whole lot of noise and enjoying it, and making up, and not making up physically, but in my mind, becoming, I wanted to be Superman. That didn't work out. Captain Marvel, all of that stuff. That's what I've been doing as an opera singer, play acting, and doing it with this thing that is a part of me, and that's music. So it gives you a chance to, if you had a really bad day, and you're getting ready to go out on stage, and you're doing Carmen, Don Jose, and there's a chance to get into a knife fight when you wind up. I had the great honor of being Shirley Verrett's first Don Jose, the Spoleto Festival. And her husband told me, and Shirley, I love Shirley, I mean, who couldn't, who wouldn't? But her husband told me, he said, you know, he said, you're the Don Jose that I fear the most when you stab Carmen, because it is so. But that's play acting. You learn how to do it so that the audience goes, but no blood is shed. And so you work things out. I mean, you bring yourself to what it is you do. You're playing a character. Every character you play, you can relate to in some way, because even at an early age, there are feelings of, I'd like to kill this person, you know. But you work all that out on stage. So it's a blessing. You can walk off stage, go out and have dinner with the person you just stabbed to death, and you know. But really, it's continuing to play the way you played as a child. With great music. Can't beat that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that catharsis. I remember watching the trio from Der Rosenkavalier, and I was like, oh, so if you have an affair with a person, that's the way you're supposed to leave it when they move on to somebody else. Oh, okay, I got that. I get that, right? But I mean, there's some life lessons that opera can teach you. But I do want to go back to the operatic singing voice. When I was studying, my voice professor taught me that operatic singing is nothing more than an educated scream. That's exactly what she said. Yeah. And I was like, well, that applies to rock, gospel, ska. So what is it about the technique of operatic singing that connects to other styles of singing, but also makes opera unique?
Go on, Mr. Shirley.
For me, I think
You're the most experienced.
Thank you, Will.
yeah, I don't know. I think it's how you apply the technique to how opera is written in the music. Like, I remember when I picked up a piece like Barber of Seville for the first time, and it was a really daunting thing, but it was, you know, once I got a hold of it, it's like applying what I was learning into a piece like that. That's so pattery, it's got range, and I don't know, I think it's just for what separates opera, and I guess from any genre, or every genre is different because of how you apply your technique and your singing into the style of whatever it is you're doing, and it's so exciting. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
I think that I've often said that we who teach singing, classical singing, are teaching the voice to sing the way it really doesn't want to sing. What is it to make sound? What is the purpose of sound? Whether it's coming from a human being or from an animal or from a squeaky floor. The purpose of it is to carry a message. If you're walking down the street late at night and you hear something go in back of you, you better turn around and find out what it was. Because it's telling you something. Maybe it's not something that is dangerous, but you find out what it is. So as singers, the person who sings and is, quote, untrained is going to carry a message, because that person is going to be hooked into their solar plexus where you feel emotion. And you're going to, when it comes out, it's going to come out the way that person wants it. Yeah! You know, if that's what that person feels. And it's going to hit the emotions of the people out here. Well, in classical singing, we can't quite do it that way, right? It's got to come out with a bit more of a cultured, rather than going, yeah! So, when we sing anything, we have to respect the truth of that style. And if the style is one where one might be hurt, and then, I mean, how many opera singers have lost their voices? You know? So you have to learn how, at some point, maybe to respect what the instrument can do in a healthy fashion. But there are a whole lot of folks who have never been trained but have achieved great fame just letting it come out. And they've been blessed with an instrument that has been able to deal with it without being shredded, torn apart. So if I were to sing rock, I couldn't sing it, yeah, you couldn't do it that way. If I were to sing gospel, it's a combination of the two. When I was growing up at Ebenezer AME Church, we had a senior choir, my mother sang in, that sang the classical stuff. And we had a gospel choir. Now I remember the woman who was a big soloist, her name was Verschier was her last name. She had a heck of a voice. But gospel during that time was not quite as it is today. But she could shake the rafters. And so learning how to shake the rafters, whether it's in opera or whether it's in gospel or even rock, without killing yourself, ruining your instrument, it's wise to get to know, okay, if I'm going to do, and try to do it too often, I'm liable to come up with some nodules down there that I don't need or want. So learning how to negotiate it and still be able to carry the message. Because if there's no message being carried, if you're standing on stage singing your technique, then you are not you're not producing what sound is all about. So it's got to be connected to your emotions, your feelings, or else it's an empty. I mean, a person that doesn't have a great instrument can still have a huge career if they sing from their soul. I think in terms of someone like Roland Hayes, one of the first black superstars in classical music. Hayes' voice was not a big honking instrument. It was a delicate voice. But he sang from his soul. He sang connected to that place in the center of your body, your solar plexus, where all of your nerve endings come together. And he had a huge career without having a huge voice. Quite often now, people think, if I'm going to sing operatic, I've got to be making a whole lot of noise. Huh? Well, it ain't necessarily so. I mean, a smaller voice that is connected to the reason for making sound in the first place, on stage with a conductor who respects that voice, can have a huge career. I mean, that's been the case always. I mean, a tenor like Alfredo Kraus, Nicolai Gedda, great singers. But they had conductors who respected that. So I don't care what kind of voice you got, unless it's a Birgit Nilsson sound. If you got somebody down there in the pit who is into this all the time, forget about it. So using what you have with respect for what it is that you're going to say and sing. That's fundamental.
Next question.
Wow. Okay. That's the word. All right. So Opera America's Field-Wide Report reveals some representational challenges for the field. All across the board, artists, composers, board members, on and on and on and on. Why is representation important, and particularly in opera, right? Versus, business or engineering or some other area where it should also be important, but Why is representation in opera specifically important?
I sigh because I spent the last 3 years of my life having these very conversations after pandemic, after the murder of George Floyd. Well, because I was the 16-year-old kid from Philadelphia who sat in the middle seat and got to see Denise Graves sing Carmen, and I saw myself, and it made it real for me. You know, I got to see the picture of Mr. Shirley in that Pinkerton uniform, yes, sir. You know, and I got to see myself. That's why, and I got to, and it was real for me, being a young singer, seeing Louise do all the things that she did with ushering in this whole, you know, she was doing the work before it was a thing. Now it's a thing we're all doing. We're all benefiting from the labor of this whole genre, you know, that we are now taking the mantle and pushing. So that's why it's important, you know, representation is important. It's important because people want to come to the theater and they do want to see themselves. They don't have to close their eyes and just imagine that someone who doesn't look like them is doing the thing, right? Like we're expecting people to buy tickets, we're expecting people to support us online, we're expecting people to buy our CDs, and we'll make a CD every 6 months. That's what I say. He's got a new release, and you know, I mean, I teased him the last time we were together, you know. But yes, like it's important for him to be doing those things, and Louise to be doing those things, and me and Mr. Shirley to be teaching. There are not enough African American teachers teaching boys in institutions like this, and you know, all the big schools and stuff. Like we need, it is important so that you can believe that it's possible, so that people buying the tickets can want to continue to come and support this art form. That Ford Foundation and Tyler Perry and Oprah Winfrey and, you know, I wasn't gonna say Diddy, but you know, not no more because he ain't got no money. But you know what I mean? Like the whole, like all of the multi-millionaire, billionaire people, they need to see us. They need to support. They need to know that we are out here doing this thing and supporting us. That's why representation matters and being on the boards, and you know, you have to be present, and then other people who don't look like us need to know what it's like to be in those spaces with us, right? Because it's not just us getting the opportunity, it's also other people being in the space together, being next to people who they're not necessarily with all the time and experiencing it together, right? That's why representation matters.
I think that was so beautifully said. And as you were saying, how do you envision that this is for you if you never see someone like you doing some of these jobs? And this is in any field, but particularly in the arts. And I always go back to the stories. You can't see your story, you can't see yourself in it. So it becomes this thing that you just ignore and your community ignores it. But how many people are we not giving an opportunity to even find it might be the next greatest voice, never saw a person like them on a stage, and so they thought they couldn't do it. Or like me as a kid, even though I didn't know I would become a singer, I never forgot seeing Leontine Price's face as Aida on that picture. It was one of those things I was like, oh, this does mean that there are people like me that can do this. And actually, Willis Patterson was on the faculty of Virginia State at the time. So I had these two models, one in person, but this woman's face was also there. And I think it's hugely important for our little children, for our students trying to come to graduate school, the teachers being in place. It's important. It's important for society to know that there's a history of all of us.
The problem is that there's so many people who don't want that
Yes, that's
to be
true.
the case. And because history shows that from the very beginning, people who have been given the ability to do things can do it. But society has a way of determining, oh, well, no, this is something that we don't want this. No. And that's the problem. That's the problem. And I don't know if that will ever be eliminated from human society. I've said this often. That's part of the thing that drives humanity. And we see it all over the world now. Survival of the fittest. And as long as that drives human animals, as it does those in the lower class of animal life, then there are always going to be those who say, no, I mean, we can't have these people moving us out. We are being replaced. I think that says it all. So there's got to be a continual push to say, look, I can do this thing. It's just to get out of the way. And here again, it's somebody on the other side, at least in my experience, that says, okay, and takes the risk of letting this person inside. Because it is a risk, there's no doubt about it. I remember my first tour with the Metropolitan Opera. The Met used to travel about 6 or 7 cities. And it started off in Boston, I think, and then went down to the South, Alabama. And Birmingham it was a huge group of supporters for the Met. I mean, they did big parties, and so it was just. And I heard that we had received a call from the head of the Met organization down there saying, we are looking forward to y'all coming down here. We got all the parties and so forth. But we got to ask you not to let the black members of the company come to the. And Bing reportedly said, fine, we won't come to Birmingham. And the Met did not go to Birmingham. I don't think they ever went back to Birmingham. Now, that was a huge step for him to take because that was money supporting the organization. But he said, okay, no. So, unfortunately, there will always be that kind of resistance. This country is made up of all ethnicities. And amongst those ethnicities, there are people who are capable of doing what is desired to be done, but are not always encouraged or otherwise allowed to do it. And that is a huge thorn in the side of America. And we see it happening now, unfortunately. I mean, I've lived a few years during which span of time I've seen moments of hope, thinking maybe we can move forward now. I wasn't around the time of the Civil War, but when that happened, and slavery was abolished, and that had to be a moment of hope, but that didn't last very long because segregation locked in to keep them out. And signing of the Civil Rights Act, another moment of hope, and maybe we can move forward and live up to our rhetoric. Give me your tired, your poor, and so all that stuff, and we, the people of the United States, and blah, blah, blah. But that didn't last very long. And now we see a situation where the progeny, where descendants of immigrants had founded this country, immigrants that were sent to this country to conquer it, which means also to take it any means necessary, which they did. We see descendants saying to people at the border in Texas, these people are poisoning our country. They're doing. Well, I'm sure that the indigenes, the American Indians that were here when the Europeans started floating off of the boats, probably said the same thing. What are these people doing here? They're poisoning our country. It's the same old, unfortunately. So to move ahead, to embrace Americans, good, bad, it's a tough road to hoe. Has been for centuries.
I just wanted to, I'll be brief with my comment after I've already made my comments, but I think why representation matters, we won't have butts in seats unless we embrace the idea that we have to represent everybody needs to see themselves on the stage in some capacity. It doesn't have to necessarily be just about race, but culture as well, class as well. You know, this new era that we're in, you know, with new leadership and you know, after pandemic, people not wanting to come back because they're still afraid. There's still a group of people who used to buy tickets faithfully that will never come back to the theater. They're not coming back. And as we see, particularly in America, with all of this new push and new pieces being written, you know, I mean, literally, like, Fire Shut Up in My Bones saved the Met. The Met was going to close had it not been for Fire having such a huge success. That's period. That's not alleged. That is the truth. And we got to see all of these people come out, all people from, you know, Hollywood, all this, you know, and across the board, and everybody. And the world got to see people flood the Met. Like, we've seen it, because when they do Porgy and Bess, what happens? The Opera House is full. And so while, yes, we will not get people to come back, there will be people who will push back, but there are people who don't want the diversity. But you do want to still come to the opera, right? Because if you don't, it's going to close. It's not going to die. It's just that they're not going to be able to fill up 3,000 seats. Like the Met, the Lyric, this War Memorial in San Francisco. Like you have, the model has to change. Diversity. We have to tell all the stories. We have to change the way we sonically hear opera to get people to come. To see it. It doesn't have to be 12 shows. Most companies can't even do 3 productions in a year. We're in that financial situation now where, you know, it directly affects singers, because if there's no work, you don't make money. Mm-hmm. The conductors, the designers, everybody. And so it's like, it doesn't matter if you don't want to come. Then stay over there, because we're going. Like, it is going to change. We are going to work hard to keep our American opera alive, you know? So it matters. It matters for all of us. Even if you're not a minority, a person of color, whatever, like, you still want to go, you still want a job. You still want to go to the theater, right? You still want to support this art form. Like, it is imperative for all of us to understand that we have to build wide, you know, this new way now.
It's interesting that musical theater is opera. And I believe that if opera is going to have a life in America, then there have got to be more operas written about life in America, reflecting life in America. Because here again, I mean, people, just look at opera, for instance. Opera was brought to this country by immigrants who became wealthy and wanted to become the new aristocracy and ape the aristocracy in Europe. So the Metropolitan Opera was founded by basically people of Germanic background. Everything that was performed there for some years was in German. So we had people coming in, certainly a lot of people Germanic, but there were probably people coming just to be seen in the box, who didn't have a clue as to what was going on stage, because they couldn't understand the language. So there was that thing that finally began, so there's less of that now. And Americans are wanting to say, look, a fellow a couple weeks ago, that I'm a member of an organization here on campus, professor, he was saying, well, you didn't want to go to the opera because I don't like to go and not understand what's going on. Well, that's understandable. So more works that reflect American life in English that people can relate to. So musical theater, I think, is doing quite well. They do that. So, quote, opera has got to do the same thing so that people will say, oh yeah, well, I see myself there. I can relate to that.
Can I add that I was in New York when Fire Sharp on My Bones premiered, and I was singing with the orchestra, and I was with the conductor, and I said, I got to go see the premiere tonight. I know I'm not supposed to because I'm singing tomorrow night. Can we go? And he said, you know, I actually wanted to go too. So we snuck off and went to see it. And what was so amazing was sitting up, we were in the very, very top. They did a step show in the middle, and this relates to your comment. They did a step show in the middle of the opera. I, growing up on the campus of Virginia State, had seen so many step shows, knew what a step show was, and I thought about what must it have been like to those who had not had that cultural experience to understand why people were hollering in the Metropolitan Opera when a step show starts, but all those who knew what that cultural reference was. So it was a moment of education for those who had not spent that time. And so, as you say, talking about stories and seeing yourself reflected, I was watching an audience that began to embrace something that was new to them and begin to understand, oh, this is what your culture does. And that, I think that's such a beautiful moment, and more of these new operas, as they're beginning to present these stories that are of other ethnicities. I'm looking forward to seeing Omar. I haven't seen that, but it was a story I didn't know. I'm looking forward to hearing it and seeing it put on the stage about these North Africans who were Christians, because the myth has always been that the slave trade was about making Africans into Christians, but there's already people who were Christian in Africa. And so bringing that story forward is really, it's about educating us to the stories of each other. And so I think that you're absolutely right, that the more we see this and the more we reflect, we really are learning about each other. There's lots of, the Met just did one about Hispanic culture of Florencia. Yeah, they're really experimenting with some new operas, and I think that it's going to be wonderful. I'm looking forward to seeing these others.
And what I love about it, it supports my theory that I teach my entrepreneurship and leadership students, in that doing the right thing is profitable, right? And so if opera thinks about it in a particular kind of way, there's an infinite number of stories about humans to tell.
Right.
So it never has to go out of business if it does the right thing.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to ask one last question and open it up to all of you. Because I have you brilliant artists and scholars and thinkers, I'm just really curious to know what you think about this question. What's on the other side of liberation? We talk about liberation all the time. We fight for liberation. But how often do we get to think about what's on the other side for all of us? Because our liberation is inextricably linked to each other as humans, right? So what's on the other side of liberation?
I mean, liberation is to be free, right? I feel free. I feel more free than I have ever in my singing life. My life is different now in 2024 than it was in 2020. I had a very traditional operatic career. I did all the right things, went to all the right schools. I listened to everything that everybody ever asked me to do. I always tell people, the first 5 years of my career, I struggled because what I wanted to do wasn't the thing I was always trained to do. And so no one could see it. No one could see, Karen, you need to do this, this, and this. So I spent first just doing the things that I thought I was supposed to do versus what I wanted to do. And now, once the pandemic hit, we all got to sit at home, and I got to do all of the things out loud that I was doing quiet, secretly. sing all the chamber music, commission all the things, talk to my friends, like my Facebook Live show that I started. I was doing that like on gigs, and I just got the chance to do it, in front of the entire industry, like all of the things, and then it opened up the world to me, and I feel more free now because I'm juggling so many balls, and I'm advocating for people, and I'm advocating for myself at the same. I'm not even advocating for myself. I'm advocating for people, and then people are seeing me, and they go, oh. Well, I think she could do this. I think she could do that, right? But I feel free. I feel even embarrassed to say it because I spent so much time trying to make myself something else, right? But I feel free. I mean, hopefully it lasts. Hopefully it sustains itself. But again, it depends on how I play my cards, right? But also. I think the industry, I feel free, but I don't feel like the industry feels comfortable even talking about liberation, right? I think as we're beholden to someone else's purse strings and how we produce large-scale opera, that's why I love chamber music. It's more malleable, it's smaller, it's flexible, it's all of these things that opera is not. Opera's a cruise ship, where everything else, all the other genres, the recital, they're boats, different, right? It's easier. So I don't know, but I think that the industry could do a justice to it themselves if they thought more about liberation, what it feels. But you got people who are used to shackling people. So what can they say about liberation? They don't even know. Mm-hmm. These general directors are beholden to people who make their money on keeping people feeling unempowered. Like, it's a whole system, it's a whole thing. So that's all I gotta say about that.
Well.
Wow. Oh yeah, I agree with Karen on the tip that, for me, liberation kind of came into my journey during the pandemic, when everything had shut down, and just sort of not waiting for permission to do things because we just had all this time. And I think in doing that and doing projects that were just led by what I felt passionate about and what I wanted to do, I don't know, liberation on the other side to me just looks like a beautiful art making that's just, driven by artists and, without any shackles of, money or ties to, boards and things, where we can really do the things we want to do, see more pieces and stories about us, and really pushing it to a brand new level that we've never seen. It's hard to even comprehend because I don't even know what looks like, but I don't know.
I hope it is a continuation of where we all have gone, and particularly, I think so many people figured out new models of doing things. That's what I'm most excited about, and I'm excited about seeing what the young people, they continue to push, and the new models that people like you guys have actually set up for them to show them that you can do Black music if you want, you can do gospel music, you can do jazz, and you're not pigeonholed as people were once afraid of, because if you stepped outside the box, then people were going to say you only did this, or if you do a Porgy and Bess, you're stuck in that one mode. And I'm hoping liberation looks like you can choose to do Porgy and Bess if you want, and not have to wait until you feel like all the good roles have been done, but you can do it in your 30s, and then you can still go and sing Tosca the next week, and not. That's what liberation looks like to me, that fluidity that people desire to have, that you can sing a recital, you can sing jazz one night, you can sing gospel the next. You can you can tell the stories that you want to, you can sing what you want to, and feel free to not be judged by the New York Times or Opera News or anybody for having, stepped outside.
Well, life has a way of making change. Mm-hmm. The pandemic certainly forced change. it forced all of us to try to come up with something else, to embrace technology in a way that when I was coming along, I mean, it wasn't there for that, but it's forced young people to, okay, let me promote myself rather than waiting for my manager to do it for me. Let me record myself singing this in my living room and putting it out there on social media and so forth. You know, like an old geezer like me, I'm saying, what? But it's working. Life will do that. And that's about all I can say. And it's exciting to see young people, okay, taking it by the throat and working with it, making something for themselves.
Self-determination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll open it up for you all and for your questions.
Is this on? Okay, so what we want to do here is toss this cube around.
Oh.
I think we have, that way you're heard on the live stream and it's on the recording and all that, everybody can hear well.
That's
So
technology.
I know,
Look at that.
technology. I think we have some students who have questions, but we can also take live questions, but I'll start it here. Are there student submitted questions? Does somebody have that? Oh, okay, well, who has a question? Caitlin, you want to do this, please?
Yeah, I guess just kind of for all of us in the room that you know about your careers, but maybe don't know everything that you're kind of passionate about. I guess I just had a question of what things do you all do for representation in opera? Like what things are you passionate about and the steps that you kind of take to making that a reality for us?
Show up, number one. Every time I show up, I'm representing,
Right.
you know, whatever group I'm representing at the time. You know, for me, my dear friend Angela Brown, I'm sure you all know who she is, a soprano. I got to watch her too when I was a young singer. She said, "Karen, you're doing all the things that you always said you wanted to do." When I was a young singer, I want to run a company. I want to, you know, hire. I want to do that. I want to direct. I want to, you know, I don't know. What was I talking about? Just sing, you know, like, I mean, but again, like, not that I'm a general director to any stretch of the imagination. Like, what happened during pandemic, when we were having these very conversations, I stepped boldly into having all the conversations, saying all of the things, doing all of the things, because what people don't know is that I have been in this industry since I was 18 years old, and I'm 40, I'll be 49 in September. That's a long time. I got to see a lot of things. I got to experience a lot of things. I got to see a lot of people. You know what I mean? And so I was able to speak from a place of experience, and people go, "Oh, Karen, she's more than just a pretty voice. She actually has something to say," which is the thing about singers. I think we all just make these sounds, and we don't actually have, you know, substantive things to say, and that we're living in this world, you know, navigating in this world. So I have an artistic advisory position at Portland Opera, which I had never even sung at Portland Opera. And when he DM'd me on Facebook, I was like, "Who's this lady DMing me?" You know, I didn't even know. Right, and then he hit me in the DM and gave me a job, right? And so there's that. I started consulting for companies. I actually got a call from a company to consult on an AIDA. I'm not singing, but like on the other side of helping to get around the quote unquote problematic part. I said, "Well, sign me up. I'll do that." It's a role that I've sung, you know, and I don't think it's problematic. It's just, you know, there are certain small little things that, again, that general director said, "We are these three white men who are producing this opera, and we can't produce it in the way we used to because we can't do traditional productions because there's no money to produce." They can't even produce Aida, which is really a chamber opera, but it's very expensive. So we have to now go back and reimagine. And they looked around and they saw that there was nobody, not even a woman, in the space. And so they invited me into that space. You know, I always commissioned composers, you know, following Miss Louise here, you know, I like low-key did, and then when pandemic happened, I started making some money. I was like, oh, I can like, you know, and you know, and then in the pandemic, I got a concert agent. You know, I was really determined to change the trajectory of my career for myself, like to be more, you know, have more agency. And I found somebody who didn't have any singers on their roster, but they were in the space, but their artists were performing in a place that I wanted to be. And so I did my politicking and my networking thing that I did, and I sold myself. And they bought what I was selling, and I have a whole other career doing all of these other things, which, you know, I'm so proud. You got to sing one of the pieces that I got to support the George Shirley competition. And, you know, so again, I'm taking all of the things that I, you know, all my representation, all of my jobs and all my things, and then like, you know, trying to give it back, you know, in that way. But yeah, so I'm representing in all the chamber music space, the concert music space, the recital space, the operatic space, the industry space. I don't know what my life's gonna look like once I'm done singing full time. I don't know if I'm going to teach. I don't know if I want to go on, you know, the opposite side of the table, dealing with boards, being a general director. I mean, you know, I get my fundraising skills up. You know, that's, you know, because that's so much of what that job is. It's less artistic than it is more fundraising, like being a president of a university, right? So for me, I was telling Caitlin, I'm doing so much. I'm on the job training, learning. But what somebody told me, Mark Skorka at Opera America told me, he said, singers are the least celebrated in the sense of we have been in this thing for so long, we got to see everybody on this side do all of the things. And when it's time to do all of the things, no one calls on the singers. But you got to watch. You know the repertoire, you know the singers, you know how the productions work, you know how to work the donors, the sponsors, the this and that, and all of the things. And so I thought about that, and I was like, well, we do know more than what we think we do. And so that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, following in the footsteps of Dr. Louise, I'd like to program Black composers whenever I get a chance. And it's one of the reasons why I love to find ways and opportunities to just make my own programs, you know. If there are things that are missing on the stage, you know, be that change and like make it happen. And that's one of the things that I realized, you know, during the pandemic, that, you know, kind of coming out the box and be like, oh, it's nice out here, you know, like, and having that sort of freedom is just great because, you know, doing things, you know, that you really feel, you know, as I said, you know, passionate about, want to see more of, you know, I try and make those things happen and find my own support. I do a lot of recording projects and bringing in more visibility to Black composers and other works that I really feel, you know, deserve a platform and for people to have access to. So that's something that I'm doing more of, writing music myself, and yeah, it's a combination of different things. Yeah.
I have to say, I'm so proud of both of them. The work that they've been doing. Congratulations for Will getting nominated for a Grammy for that CD on African American music. I couldn't have been prouder to be a part of that with him. Yeah. And for Karen, the work that she has done with the George Shirley competition, but all the other things that she's done giving back. It's just really gratifying to see folk, you know, and as they're taking your place, and I'm glad. I am glad. I can go sit down and retire. Not quite.
Not right.
Not yet. But you know, for my stuff, I mean, you all are my students. So the students here at the university in general. So you know, I'm teaching African American art song, trying to keep the genre alive. But also, I love thinking about other projects that do invite and bring in other artists to give back to the next generation. So I do a lot of that. But I'm also always trying to think of what's next. What else can we do? What else how can we think outside the box? So creating things like the George Shirley competition with Mr. Shirley was one of the joys. 14 years now, I can't believe ago that we did that. And to see it grow into 5 divisions, and there are going to be probably more than 100 people here competing this year. And it just, that's what I'm enjoying. I'm enjoying being in that space, but I'm doing some writing. I've written a chapter for a Cambridge University Press thing that's coming out. Our Humanities Collaboratory, Tyrese is a part of it. We've just written a book. It's coming out in University of Michigan Press. And the project that I just did with Julia Perry, that Will was a part of in New York, they've asked us to do a volume from Oxford University Press. So that symposium on the day, I hadn't even had a chance to tell you yet, but there's a lot of energy in different projects that are coming from projects. I'm also starting to do more work in terms of advocacy in the courts with composers whose estates have sort of languished, and that's what the Julia Perry project was partly about, is getting copyrights assigned so that the works can be performed now. And so I've done that with Margaret Bonds, and I'm at the end with Julia Perry. We're about to be able to make some announcement probably in the next 2 weeks about what's going on with that. But then we go on to the next one. So it's always about how can I reinvent the work after starting in one path, encouraging others. Like when I did the Highway 1 recording, I did one recording of William Grant Still with the hope of inspiring others to either program the work or then to start recording the other 8 operas that exist. And that's what's happening. And so I'm tickled to sort of step out there, put my foot out there and say, okay, now it's yours. Let's go on what other work needs to be done. So I'm that person that's always like the shark looking for something new, some new food.
I actually I'm pretty excited about working with organizations around change. So outside of my role here at Michigan, I do consulting with cultural organizations and learning that there are so many organizations that do want to change and that do want to do the right thing, and heartened by how they're insisting on keeping that door open. So like I've done some things with Chorus America, League of American Orchestras, Opera America, and these are the organizations that kind of serve as the trade association for all opera companies, all orchestras, all choruses, and they're doing this leadership in a very special way. Like the League, I mean, I don't know if any of you have read their statement on racial discrimination.
Oh yeah. The League.
So normally I tell cultural organizations to not make statements, because if you're not gonna actually put meat behind it and actually invite the public to hold you accountable, then don't do it, right? The League, go read it and let's have a conversation about it.
Absolutely.
Hi, my name is Troy. I'm a student from Eastern Michigan University. I'm a music student there. And recently, our school just started production of The Magic Flute by Mozart. And originally, I didn't want to audition because this opera is just not my thing. I'm more contemporary. But my vocal teacher encouraged me to do it. She kept pushing me for me to do it. And eventually, I just gave in and did it. So I auditioned last December for it, and the results came back, and we didn't get to choose the roles, they picked the roles for us, and I got chosen as Monostatos, which is historically known as the slave, the Black African slave in the Magic Flute. And his whole role is just full of racism and stuff like that. And when I found out about that, it just made me feel some type of way. I didn't know how to really react to it because they didn't have a conversation with me. They didn't ask me about it before. They just gave me that role because I was the only Black person to audition for the Magic Flute because our school isn't really that diverse. And I was just wondering, I just want some advice on something I could do because I feel like I could go to the head of the music department, but I feel like not much will get done about it. And I just want to know what would be something I could do to help students, newer students come in so they won't get that experience that I got.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, where does it stand now? I mean, are you rehearsing? Are you?
I quit it because
Oh,
I just.
okay, so you're not any longer associated with it. Did you talk to any of the faculty about your feelings?
I emailed my choir teacher, who's like in charge of the chorus part, because I was in that, and I told him I wasn't comfortable being in that either, and I explained to him the situation, but the only thing he recommended for me to do was like to do a symposium.
To do what? Sorry.
A symposium about it.
Oh, to create a symposium about it?
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's what needs to be done. I mean, it's, as someone who's sung a lot of magic flutes, I've sung Tamino. Yeah, that's Monositos is always the character, you know. In terms of trying to prevent this kind of thing from happening in future, that's a hard one, but maybe a symposium would be the right thing to establish and talk about. Why were you chosen to do this? Because you're black? Why weren't you chosen to do Tamino? I mean, I think that, yeah, there needs to be a conversation about that with the faculty. And if other students can be involved, there's some way of doing this so that it becomes an opportunity to address this issue, then it would be a golden opportunity to do so. Knowing that it may not change anything, but it will certainly make people aware of the fact that, oh, maybe they didn't think about this, and they need to think about it.
Don't do more labor. They want you to do the labor. They want you to take the problem, fix it by doing the symposium. Free labor. Tell them if you want a symposium, cut a check. I'll give you the most beautiful symposium. You invite all the amazing people that you know, Miss Shirley, Dr. Toppin, like all these people to come, invite them to the table, tell them to set a beautiful table, and you do it right. And make sure you get you a little honorarium out of it too, as well. You know, that's real reparations, right? That's how you solve those issues. And then you get a chance to teach. But first you find out, like, well, maybe ask for feedback, right? And then also, like, that's a great question. Like, what do you do when you're offered roles and you're put in situations that have to sing things that are against your moral compass or the things that you know, how you feel? Like, one thing is like, that's the character, right? Whatever. That's not me. I'm just playing a character. But also those things like Monositos, you have to find the dignity in everything that you do. If you're a bad guy and you're the best person ever, you're a real person, and you have to find the dignity, the positivity, the reasons why this person is the way they are. That's what you're charged to do as a storyteller, right? So it's fine. Like this new generation, I don't want to do it, so I quit. I don't want to sing. But when you need that check, you need that opportunity. You want to be in that cast. You want to work. You want to do these things, and you have to find the things that make you feel empowered in the thing that you do. But make sure they pay for you. You get a table, and you craft your symposium.
And definitely having the conversation. Somebody needs to have a
Yes.
conversation.
Yeah.
That shouldn't just go away. It needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that
But
forward to us.
I congratulate you on asking the question and wanting to do something about it.
Thank you guys so much. It really helps. Thank you.
Symposium.
Hello, my name is Dorian Hall. I am a graduate of the University of Michigan. I did my master's here. I studied with George Shirley. I am a first-year doctoral student, the DBA program, and I'm a native of New Orleans, Louisiana. My question is, and I lived in Philadelphia. I have a lot of family. We have a lot of mutual people. We'll talk later. My question is, we've talked over the years about race, and I know how you feel about race. Is race a thing? I think that's always the elephant in the room. Can you give us your definition of race? It's a social construct, but is it really a thing? What's the definition of race?
Human race. There's only one race, and that's the human race. Different ethnicities, yes, but one race. Biologically, one race. Color doesn't make a different race. Features. I've told people, I said, look, if you are a different race than I am, then your head will protrude from a different part of your body than mine protrudes from mine. Your feet, your arms, they'd be in different places. But the only thing that makes us different may be the color of the skin, but everything else is the same place. The race lie was put out by anthropologists who wanted to differentiate themselves from other human beings. And we need to get rid of that term when speaking of human beings. We all bleed the same. We eat the same. We think with the brain that is in our cranium. We are all human beings. And I might add, when you look at the history of human beings on the face of this earth, you would have to, I think, admit that we are the worst species of life on the face of this planet by the way we treat each other. Cannibalism, mental, spiritual, physical. Look at what's happening now. Human beings killing each other with joy. Somebody asked me the other day, an interview that I did, what does the Beethoven Ninth mean to you? Because you've sung it a lot. Schiller's poem, Ode to Joy. My answer is that Beethoven Ninth is a great work. But like so many great works that we human beings create, it falls short. The text speaks of a way of being that doesn't really exist. Ode to Joy. Well, it can't be something that reflects us because we take too much joy in killing each other, as is going on now in Ukraine and the Gaza Strip, has gone on ever since the beginning of human life on the face of this planet. The ants and whatever, they can't match us when it comes to cannibalizing ourselves. So the Ninth is a great work, but in the final analysis, it doesn't really reflect what happens between us as human beings.
Hi, my name is Lauren. I'm a first-year master's student. All of you, I like this. You're really fantastic event, and it's great because I think all of you have very different perspectives. In that, though, I wanted to ask, what helped you get through the hard times? What helped you get through a pandemic or all life situations? Is there something that you did or you believed in, or something that you used to help you get through to continue on the arduous path of being a musician?
One of the things that certainly helped me was my faith. I'm a person of faith, and so even though the world looked, dismal for all of us, I had to believe that there was something on the other side. And so with that, I also utilized the time to, as most people know, I'm up here, but my family is in North Carolina. So I was not even able to get to my family in the beginning part of the pandemic. So I was actually here alone, and I had just taken the job, I think, 3 years before. So I hadn't really made a circle of support, except for people like, of course, my mentor, Mr. Shirley, and colleagues that I already knew. So I needed to figure out a way to make myself useful during the time, because like everybody else, we saw contracts going away and you're going to be locked in the house. And so I turned it as an opportunity to say, okay, it's not going to be about me. I'm not going to focus on me and how I feel. What can I contribute to the world at this point? And that's when I actually started publishing anthologies. I published 9 anthologies of African American music during the pandemic. Wow. That's what I was doing. I was reading voraciously all these books that I had on my shelves to help me think more about all kinds of subjects, but history particularly is of interest to me. So I was reading those books that I wanted to read, and those things that that would give me positive energy during the darkest time in my life. I've lived through a long time, but there's nothing like the pandemic. And then I also tried to figure out, I knew it was important to connect to people, because if you don't, we as human beings, that isolation was really going to get to us. So I learned to use technology. I know my students laugh about me in technology sometimes, but I'm actually very good at it, comparatively to some people. But I mean, I used it as a tool to begin to reach out first to family and friends that I hadn't seen, to check on others. It was constantly about, how are you doing? What are you doing? Who are you connecting to? Do you need help getting food? Do you need help getting groceries? And I was doing that to people all over the country while I found things to work. And so that for me, and looking for creative projects, I did a gigab of podcasts. The next thing I knew, I started getting all these invitations to do master classes. I was in New York in the morning, Baltimore in the middle of the day, Atlanta in the evening, and I'm just sitting in my chair. But it actually became sort of an interesting thing, and then money started coming in as a part of it. So the contracts I lost were replaced by teaching, by doing seminars on. People became very interested in African American music, first time in my entire career that they were so interested. Mm-hmm. And so it almost became another business. But all of that, my objective was how to keep yourself sane and moving forward as the world around you is crumbling. Mm-hmm. And acknowledging that other people were hurting. That was sort of my approach.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very similar to Louise. I have to tell you, those little $200 and $300 panels were adding up, honey.
They did.
In a week, I was like, whoa.
I know, right? It's like, oh, that one check, I didn't miss that.
Oh. Exactly. That's the reality of the matter, for sure, But very similar to Louise, all of the things. But for me, it wasn't necessarily this pandemic. It was 2008, the housing crash. Those of us who were in the business, and then 2008 happened. So 2006, I last minute made my Met debut. Then my whole career took off. 27, got married in 07, all the things. In 08, the housing market. Into 09, everything crumbled, everything closed. There were companies that never came back. And here I am, and thinking I'm gonna be a star. I just was on the net stage and all of the things. And I got married, and then all my work. And I was sitting in California. I was living in Philadelphia, and I moved to California to be with my husband. And I had nothing. no work, no support system, and I sat there and I was depressed because everything that I thought I had worked for was all gone. And I didn't even know I was depressed. And my husband, I was faking it. Like I was like, he would go to work and I would be like home in my pajamas until like 4:45. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to get this house together and do all the things and pretend. And then one day I was like, no more. No more. I wasn't singing because I had nothing to prepare for. It's about 08, 09. And then I just started singing 10 minutes a day. 10 minutes became 20 minutes. I mean, no lie. 30 minutes, just kept singing. And then I started pulling rolls and music off the shelf that people said, oh no, you can't sing that yet. Oh no, you can't sing that. Well, there's no rules. So I'm gonna sing all of the stuff. I'm gonna do all of the things. I'm gonna sing Wagner, I'm gonna sing Strauss, I'm gonna sing all these big Verdi parts. And what happened was I had worked myself up not only out of my depression, but my voice back in shape. And one day, my manager called and said, you gotta, Arizona Opera wants to hear you for Tosca. Well, because I had been singing Tosca, I was ready, right? And so what I did was I called on my gift to pull me out. I just sang, and I wasn't even intentionally thinking about it. But that's really what I did. It was all inside of me to pull myself out. The thing that I loved to do, that I thought because I had nothing to sing for, I forgot why I went and decided to be a professional singer in the first place. That's free. You know, so I say that to say, like, you know, that's what I did. So when pandemic happened, I was like, all right, let's go. And not to say that COVID was easy at all. I'm not saying that at all. But I had lived through 9/11, because those of us who were in school doing the thing, and that was a whole thing because the world shut down. They changed the whole way you travel. Then we had housing crisis in 08, 09, 10, changed the entire performing arts. And then we're in pandemic. So those of us who have been in the thing trying to do it, like we were just, some of us just like, okay. And because also I wasn't a top 2% opera singer that was just singing the same 5 roles all over the world, I had flexibility because I had to hustle. I had to completely start over again after the housing crisis. Everybody forgot that I could sing. And I had to go back and prove that I could actually do the job. So I've spent the entire time building myself up, building that muscle that I didn't even know I was building, right? All of these things. So when pandemic happened, I was like, cool, okay. I was already in that flexibility mode where other singers who were like, I just sing these roles and I do this thing, were stuck because they didn't know how to do anything else but do that one thing. So.
Yeah, for me, I think just from during the pandemic, thinking back to that, I mean, it might be cliche, but from a very base level, I would take as many steps back as I needed to be appreciative of the things that I had. You know, as the jobs were going, you know, I would look up and be like, well, I have a place to stay, and I'm thankful for that. I'm in my right mind. I'm able to, you know, I'm thankful for friends and family that I can lean on. And those days are really rough. Like I would just really try and phone in or hone in on those things that, you know, I was, to get me through, you know.
And you were moving, you were gonna move.
I was gonna move. I moved to Philly, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, and then went through a bunch of different things. But, and yeah, immersing myself in creative projects as well was a big thing too. Having the keyboard there, just being able to just zone out and play whatever. Yeah.
One of the things I came away from the pandemic with is the lesson of, I always value human connection, but understanding the importance of it in a different kind of way, because if you survived the pandemic, right, it was global. There were a number of people who are not with us anymore. So if you survive, I almost feel like you have a social responsibility to be in connection with other human beings. That's right. And so for me, that is something that I seek to do, whether it's with family members, with friends, like my best friend, when we get on the phone and we laugh. And I step outside of myself and I'm like, oh my God, you're laughing and it feels so good. Like that experience of that kind of human connection is just so powerful, and it is so healing for me personally.
We've got a question, another question.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Monte. I'm a super senior here at U of M. And I guess I'm just wondering, as you have grown your careers and you're so busy, you're doing all this work, how do you stay sort of learning and developing your craft and coming back to that sort of ongoing work of how is the instrument and how am I performing and learning how to perform and learning how to communicate I guess, I don't know. How do you see that as an ongoing part of your life as artists?
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep growing. I mean, I remember doing a master class back when I was a young artist with Renee Fleming, and then one of the things she said that always stuck with me, she said, I never stopped being a student. And I always, whatever opportunity or gig that I'm on, or even in my own time, just finding ways to be better, whether that's languages or acting, whatever the case may be to, continue to improve and develop my craft. I try and do that because, it's very important.
For me, the core is singing, and everything else extends from singing. So everything I do supports the singing supports everything else I do, and vice versa. So there is no separate. When I listen to singers for Portland Opera or whatever, I'm listening and I'm learning, right, student? I'm listening, I'm learning, I'm doing all the things, I'm exercising all my muscles. If I'm teaching, if I'm master class, I don't teach. If I coach, I master class. If I, whatever it is I do, the core is always the singing, so that I don't have to feel like I'm out of my box.
Always taking lessons.
Yeah.
Even when your teacher will no longer give you lessons.
When somebody knows it all, what am I going to do?
But you can always learn something by listening to all of you. You learn something from somebody, and so having people to hear you and keep you motivated. And even colleagues. I mean, I remember I used to sing with Bill Brown when I first started my career, and he was an older, more experienced singer, and I learned so much watching him, but he would also say things to me to remind me of what you need to do to, keep honing your craft. Never take it for granted.
I was just with Will 2 weeks ago. I was like, who do you study with? Who do you with? So that here I'm listening to him sing, and I'm like, he's a freaking voice lesson. Every time I hear Will sing, I'm like, God, how's he doing that thing? We were recording, and I was like, who are you working with? But it is that using the community, your community, right?
I think we are at time.
Cool.
Just want to thank our amazing panelists. So